Aloha mai kako, mahalo to Ryan and Ilima for inviting me today. Let me just set up my presentation. So let me put this on the side. So the title that I've given this presentation comes from a quote I'll describe a little bit later, actually the last slide of this presentation. I'm also excited that we're kicking off. I understand there's a little bit of celebration in this series for Lapu'oko'a happening this month. So there's some elements on this presentation from that as well. I don't know how that just popped up, but no worries. So the title of this presentation, A Nation Can Scarcely Be Too Lavish in the Training of Its Children. Again, I'll describe that quote a little bit later. But this presentation stems from my, it's part of my doctoral research in the College of Education. I'm a educational administration doctoral student, but I'm also a faculty member, like Ryan said, in the Hawaiʻinuiākea School of Hawaiian Knowledge at Mānoa. I'm also gonna, oh my God, I think it's gonna be on every slide. So a lot of the work that I do at Hawaiinuiākea is in support of and creating programs designed to support Hawaiian student success. So I partner with NHSS a lot, and this is kind of the way we situate our work, providing support programs and services for Hawaiian students at Mānoa. So there's more Hawaiian students at Mānoa than any other university on the planet, and also the home to the largest Hawaiian faculty body. But I'm really excited to share this with DOE Kumu, and just wanted to shout out to all the public school teachers and the enormous and amazing work you folks have been doing over this last 2 years. Mahalo for all of what you folks do. So part of the way we situate the programs that we do at NHSS, a lot of it is grounded in this idea that we believe that research is a grounding philosophy in the programs and services we provide to our students, by introducing them to archival material and evidence that are left behind by our country and our ancestors and our ali'i. These are some examples on the bottom of some archival materials that students will see for the first time. 100 to 150-year-old documents, wide-ranging documents that kind of leave behind this legacy of excellence from our ancestors. And I just say that because one such program that stems from that kind of philosophy of programs that we designed for Hawaiian students at Mānoa is the Hawaii Needs Abroad program. So this presentation, I'm trying to keep it as concise as possible. I've never done this in 30 minutes, so I might seem like I'm really jamming through it, but part of it will talk about this program because it's lifted out of this genealogy of public education created in the 19th century in the Hawaiian Kingdom. So this program, for the next third of this presentation, I'll share a little bit about it. It was established in 1880. It lasted throughout and into the overthrow of the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And then we reestablished the spirit of that program in 2018. So here's some pictures of our first cohort of students that we took to Europe in 2018. So the program, the Hawaii Needs Abroad program, was actually part of the genealogy of its existence, comes from this Hawaiian Kingdom legislator, Robert Ho'opili Baker, who in 1880, through the Hawaiian Kingdom legislature, actually June of 1880, suggest funding a program to send students abroad throughout the world to receive an education. And this is in addition to the education that they're already receiving in Hawaii. It's not to supplant, but rather to supplement the genealogy of educational innovation and programs that were created in our country. So again, June of 1880, and then by August, this is one of the legislation that appropriated funds to support this program, as you can see here. Not to just travel the world for sightseeing, but to be educated. And then by August of that same year, probably faster than most, I haven't seen a program that gets funded. And then by August of that same year, we already sent the first cohort of 3 young boys. We're on a ship leaving for Europe. So that's some pretty incredible timing there. So here's some, these are the names of the 18 students that were funded by the Hawaiian Kingdom government and traveled around the world. The dates that are listed here are usually when they started their program. Some of them spend up to 6 or more years in their programs, and as you can see, in very different places around the world. You might also see from this listing, I usually ask when I do these presentations before I show this list of names, like, anybody know any of the people who may have studied in this program? And without fail, there's always somebody who raises their hand, which is always incredible to me, how many descendants there are today. Families like the Hanohano family, the Pi'anai'as, who are proud descendants of, one of the original students that studied in this program. So you can see they kind of traveled in cohorts, and that was intentional. This is an age where no FaceTime and all emails to keep. So the cohort nature of this program was, I think, kind of central to its success. I'm just going to show a couple really quick pictures of some of these scholars. So the first three, these are the three boys who studied in England, the first cohort, Abraham Pi'anai'a, Dr. Matthew Makalua, and as well as Kamauoha, who passes away actually in his studies in England. And then the bottom three are a cohort that went to Italy. This is the first cohort. So Robert Wilcox, James Booth, and Robert Boyd. So James Booth also dies in Europe. Sorry if I'm really going through this. I want to honor our time. Again, more pictures of some scholars from the program. Dr. Matthew Makalua was one that is kind of a famous program participant. He's considered one of the first Western trained Hawaiian medical doctors. He studied in England, and he's the longest supported in the program. So from 1881 until 1892, because he stays to get different kind of certifications. He ends up marrying and starting a family before he even finishes the program. And then I found a letter in Bishop Museum archives that from one of his descendants that basically after the overthrow, he's still there studying, and he says he has no country to return home to. He ends up, since the Americans took over, he naturalizes as a British subject and spends the rest of his life practicing medicine in England, and he's buried with his wife in Hastings. So this is a picture of us visiting his gravesite in England in 2018. So that whirlwind. I kind of contextualize, a lot of people have been asked, I've presented on the Hawaiian Abroad program a lot, and I've been trying to spend a lot more time contextualizing what makes this program even come to fruition in 1880. What the most isolated landmass in the world, right, creates arguably the first government-sponsored study abroad program in the world. So I argue that there's three essential things that make that possible for our country to claim that. First is that this program, like I introduced in the beginning, it was not supplanting a failing educational system in the Hawaiian Kingdom. It's actually the opposite. We had a very robust, progressive, democratic, and also very successful educational system here in the Hawaiian Kingdom. And this was like, if we were doing so well, it was like, why wouldn't we start the first study abroad program? So it's that very successful secondary educational system that creates the conditions for us to imagine the next thing and imagine a study abroad program. So these are some of the players that, helped contribute to the creation of that robust and comprehensive public educational system in the kingdom. I'll explain a couple of them. So our first college, Lahaina Luna, opens its doors in 1831. Again, I said it's the first college. It was training teachers and also the home of curriculum development for our country. Another important thing about when Lahaina Luna opens its doors in 1831, there's estimates that we have over 1,100 schools already in existence in 1831. So Lahaina Luna is coming in when we already have this very, very robust school network. And this is also before a lot of the more formal school laws that come in with the first constitution in 1840. So in other words, the schools in some ways are popping up very organically before this time. Those 1,100 schools, some of them are family schools, very embedded in communities. There's no buses back then, right? So you have to have very community oriented schools and options available. So when our first college is coming in, it has this task of how are we going to begin centralizing all of that very massive educational and school network? And that is one of the functions that ends up happening. I also wanted to say before I forget, you're familiar with some of not just our public school infrastructure, but some of our private school, Punahou, St. Louis, Nālani. These schools do not show up when America shows up in 1893, right? These are all Hawaiian institutions. These were all created in the Hawaiian Kingdom. I just wanted to not lose, it's not necessarily the focus of this presentation, but I just also wanted to not lose sight of that. These are also Hawaiian institutions. So back to Lahaina Luna, I mentioned a little bit that it was also the home of like curriculum development, right? Our first college, and also where a lot of pieces are the Hale Pa'i at Lahaina Luna is producing everything from newspapers to, in this next slide, there's a lot of map making happening on the campus that are engaging students and creating these materials that are circulated into the community. So like Hemau Palapala'aina is, it's almost like this publication was like a teacher's guide. There would be classroom atlases created, and then these supplemental teaching material, all created, in the 1830s by our first college and engaging students as well. It's not allowing people who want to. I'm going to share a little bit about this. I'm just going to skip through in the interest of time. David Malo is one of the earliest Hawaiian Kingdom school administrators, again, hired by the Hawaiian Kingdom. And, he's coming into a role that there's kind of no precedent for that role. Can you imagine entering a job that you almost have to envision what this job would look like and, figure out its different foci area. So, but this early report that I came across is really impressive. And I thought I'd share it with you because some of the things he's talking about in 1841 are things like standardizing teacher pay, adopting a salary schedule, and even an educational assessment piece in here as well, like a survey of the different schools, the different classes and teachers at the different schools. This particular one is for Maui and Lanai, and this little assessment chart that showed like, where some pupils in the class could use a little bit of help, broken down by school. I thought it was, really impressive. These are the kinds of things that we're still, trying to figure out today, and to think that our ancestors in our country were already doing this 180 years ago. So I said I'm describing the Hawaiian Eats Abroad program and the 3 recipe ingredients that made this program possible. So the first was that robust educational system, and the second is this international network and infrastructure. So before we send a single student to study abroad in 1880, we already had existing treaties with many different countries around the world. So these are just an example of some of those that were signed before our study abroad program kicks off. And this is very important because those treaties create some of the agreement languages of, how people between these 2 countries, in case of anything that arises while, our students are away, like what are the terms for our kind of engagement. So, and I think I have, yeah. So for example, this month, right, we celebrate La Ku'oko'a at the end of this month that commemorates the signing of the Anglo-France Proclamation on November 28th, 1843, which is one of the treaty partners in that treaty is England. And these 3 that I showed you earlier, these 3 that first studied in England in 1881. So that treaty that with England is signed, almost 40 years before they even go to study in England. So a long history of diplomatic relationship with that country that they're going to be studying in. And then the same for Italy, when these 3 young men go to study in Italy and they arrive there in 1881, we've had a treaty with Italy since 1863. So we're not sending students to these strange and unfamiliar places. Not only do we have treaties with them, but the newspapers throughout the 19th century, it's filled with mo'olelo and mele about these places. So Hawaiians very much knew about the world and our relationship to the world. And so, that's an integral part of, I think, what makes this program possible. Here's another example of some of the archival primary source material that you can find if you go visit Ron's on the call at the Hawaii State Archives, but there's like 6 or 7 boxes from the Hawaii Needs Abroad program. And I just wanted to share some of how amazing it is to see some of the stationery about this program, the letters back and forth between these different diplomatic offices across the world that are literally hand-holding and creating the conditions for these students to get to where they need to be, for their tuition to get paid and everything else. So you can see things like Hawaiian Consulate London, His Hawaiian Majesty Service New York. What else do we have here? San Francisco, Turin, Italy, Naples, Italy, Glasgow, Scotland. So, fascinating that we already had this established network to create the possibility for this program. And then lastly, the third thing that I argue that makes this program possible, it's not necessarily the focus for this presentation, but Hawaiians have been traveling the world for a very long time. Our ali'i for diplomatic reasons, and our Hawaiian diplomats as well, like Ha'alilio and Courtesy Okea. But also just other Hawaiians traveled also for adventure, for love, but also to bring back ike and other things in service to our country and our people. Let me check if we have time for this. I think I'm at like 15 minutes, so I'm gonna show a 2-minute video. Just a second. Okay. I'm just gonna stop real quick and share about this piece. I always do this, I try not to. So this is at the National Archives in London. And so I had never been here before, and I ordered documents ahead of time, and they had a little locker ready for us with, boxes of materials that I pulled in advance, but I hadn't been there, so I didn't know what was in what box. So we get there and I kind of split it amongst the students and said, okay, just dig in and then give a couple of minutes and then, let us know what you find. And so this particular, I'm so glad we caught this on video, but this is Kamuela. He's a master's student now in Hawaiian language, but he kind of just leans back in his chair and he's like crying and he's just like pointing and he can't even talk. And we're like, what is it? And he literally couldn't talk. So this is us all swarming around him, and that's the copy the copy there of the Anglo-France proclamation with that little, so you see that little seal. And so he's like, can I touch it? I was like, I'm gonna touch it. So yeah, let's touch it. So this is that document that you see here. So, I always want to explain how that was a pretty special moment for us, and, we're celebrating
Nālani, sorry, jumping in. Can you explain what the Anglo-French proclamation is?
Oh, we have people far better than me on this call. Well, it's, do we have time? There was an envoy sent by Kamehameha to different, not only the United States, but different powers in England, in Europe, to secure a treaty recognizing the independence of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And so part of that envoy included Timoteo Ha'alilio, which I showed in an earlier slide, and so part of a longer history that involves La Hoʻihoʻea, but skip to the meets. So La Kuʻokoʻa that we celebrate each year commemorates the signing of this particular treaty, which is the first of many treaties that the Hawaiian Kingdom secured with different powers around the world on November 28th, 1843, between England, France, and the Hawaiian Kingdom. So that is it that you see. That's their copy of the signed treaty that's in the National Archives in Kew, London, England. Is that a good explanation? 2 minutes, sorry. So anyway, I'll keep playing this video, but I just had to stop there because the video doesn't really show, and it was a pretty special moment. Okay, let me just get the presentation back up. So that was kind of a transition back to, so that was from, it was a student created video of Anyani Kuchong was in the program in 2018. So he created that video for us. So we took another group of students in 2019 and we went to different places. So 2018, we went to Paris and London. And then we visited one of the graves of one of the students that died while studying, but 3 of them passed away in the program in the 19th century. So in the second year, we visited all 3 grave sites. So 2 of them are in Italy. Sorry, 2 in England and 1 in Italy. So we visited all 3. We also, here's kind of a listing of some of the places we went. We both revisited some of the, like this picture, for example, is at the Royal Archives at Windsor. Doesn't necessarily have to do with any of the original 18 in the program, but we saw some documents there in their collection that are pertinent to the Hawaiian Kingdom, like when Queen Emma visited Windsor. She was a pen pal of Queen Victoria. Those kinds of things are there in that repository. We also visited the College of Arms. I'm not sure if I have that in this presentation, but to see one of the earliest drafts of the Hawaiian Coat of Arms that is in their repository. And then we went to some military academies where some of the original scholars studied in Italy. And I'll share a little bit about that when we get there. This is us at the National Archives. We all did a photo shoot with the Anglo-French proclamation, and it turns out you can't do that. They told us after the fact, oh, you can take pictures of the actual like scans of documents, but you can't do a photo shoot with things. But because we've never seen people so excited to do such a thing, we just let you go. So we visited 2 of the original Hawaiian Kingdom consulate locations in Italy, in Turin and Naples. This is in Naples. The building that used to house our consulate no longer exists. It was destroyed during World War II. But there's a grocery store there now. If we have time, I'll show you our interaction with that grocery store owner. This is the actual building. Actually, this is wrong. This is not Naples. This is Turin. The actual building is still there. And so we thought this used to be a flagpole, like, you know, so we just put a new Hawaiian flag back in the flagpole area. I'll just show this really quickly. So we made friends with the grocery store owner in Naples and told him that this was the Hawaiian Kingdom consulate location. So here's our little interaction. He installed a Hawaiian flag up at his but we did the whole thing, and it was pretty magical. And we went back to visit him a couple days later, and he was still telling his patrons that was the Hawaiian Kingdom consulate. So that was pretty cool. We have a travel blog on our Native Hawaiian Student Services website. For both years, we had each of the students in the program do research projects about either one of the original Hawaiian Youth Abroad students from the 19th century, or an ali'i or diplomat who visited the cities we were going to visit in the different years. So I'll just do a plug for that if you want to visit and see those. We visited the military academies that some of our students studied in, which was really hard to get into because they have a lot of security clearance. And then here's us at the graves of the 3 that passed away in the program. And then I just wanted to end here. How am I doing on time? That was the fastest I've ever sped through this. So I started off the presentation with talking about Robert Ho'opili Baker, who was the Hawaiian Kingdom legislator who introduced one of the legislation to fund this program. So in 1885, on Laku'opoa 1885, he delivered a speech that does this magical job of tying in a lot of the things that I'm arguing in my dissertation about the role of our educational system and the goals we had for our national educational project, and how it's tied into these concepts of service to our country and protecting and preserving the independence of our state. So you can read it too, but I just want to honor him this, you know, and in the month that we're celebrating, just as he did on this day. But we have just cause to feel proud of our schools, both public and private, in the fostering hands of our government. They may be found in almost every town and village of the land, and through their influence, much good is done, as it is by moral and not by physical force that the integrity and independence of the state will be preserved. There is a greater and wider world beyond the limits of these islands, and it is therefore with satisfaction that I have watched the results of that education by travel, which has been the fortunate lot of His Majesty and other distinguished Hawaiians, and is still of several young Hawaiians who are obtaining an education abroad, which will enable them to be of service to their country. It is gratifying to know that they are spoken highly of by their preceptors and rank high among their scholastic competitors. Broad and liberal views and a knowledge of countries and ideas are necessary to cope with the advance of the age, and it is by the accretion of ideas gained elsewhere that those who are destined by Providence to lead us are made worthy of the office. Such a course of education by its results is not extravagance, but money well invested. A nation can scarcely be too lavish in the training of its children. I just thought, you know, I love reading it because it's a reminder of perhaps a different time that the role and value that that our legislators and our leaders had for the role of education and of our investment in our children. So I'll just end there, but I'm happy to turn it over to Umi and then hear from you folks in the breakout too.
All right, thank you.